This is the UAO tyre table and it should be priced at £100, but it isn't. Now that comment is according to one Facebook commenter. I won't say his name. For the sake of this video, let's call him Andy Moans. So in this video, I have decided to show you guys the full journey. From the moment that I send the text message to the fabricator saying, would you make me another batch of 30 tables, right up to the point where I put a label on them and I put them in the post and I send them out to the end user. And that is genuinely how the journey starts. I put in a text message to the fabricator and say, I am ready for another batch of 30 tables. And he usually texts me back and says something along the lines of, thank you, mate, appreciate it. I'll jump on it as soon as I can. He'll very often send me a loose timeline as to when I might expect them, so I know when to tell you guys when your pre-orders will be in. What I'll then do is go ahead and do all of the things in the background. I will order more UAO branded tape if I need it. I'll order more hardware. I use different hardware suppliers for different things. A lot of the stuff comes from Accu. The Nylock M6 blackened bolts, they aren't available anywhere. I found them in one place, and that is from a random company called Car Bolts. They come separately, as do the thumb nuts. The thumb nuts that I've decided to use are actually UK made. I found the thumb nuts that I use just by good fortune one day on the internet from a UK company called Ross Casters. They're about £1.40 each. I have tried to find similar things on the well-known companies as Temu, Alibaba, AliExpress. I've ordered 7 or 8 different varieties of thumb nut, which cost me about 40p each. A massive fraction when you're talking about the numbers that I'm using these things in, but they're not the same. So I have drawers and drawers filled with different M8 thumb nuts. They just don't cut the mustard. Perhaps if I didn't know the better ones that are made in the UK existed, I wouldn't be bothered, but I'm not willing to take a backward step. So when the boxes arrive, I've then got the daunting job of assembling them because naturally they come flat pack. I cut 30 strips of UAO tape to size. I assemble all 30 boxes, and then it's a bit of a waiting game. There's one more job that I can do before I get the call to say that the tables are ready, and that is bag up the little thumb nuts with the stickers and the lanyard that will be added to the tables at the very end of the job. And that nicely brings us up to speed so I can go off and collect the tables from the fabricator. So this morning we are off over to the fabricator over in the Derbyshire Dales. Lovely little drive, but it does take a minute. I believe it's about 2 hours. I'll put it in the sat nav and we'll take a look. You'll probably notice that I am not in the white transporter because we've said our farewells to the white transporter. Not sure if you can see, but they are piled high. Birds are singing, got a nice cup of coffee because drive-throughs are now totally out of the question. Let's get there because I've got a massive surprise for you and, ironically, for me.
Here, with what he knew would be the case in economy. It would be a scrum now.
I've got something truly, what I believe is truly magnificent to show you. I've genuinely just turned up, but I know exactly how these tables are going to be laid out, and I get a little heart flutter every time I see them. Once we've got them loaded into the van, that's when I'm going to show you something really special. I've never seen it like this before, and it's going to show you guys, hopefully, a little bit of appreciation as to what these tables are actually made up of. Because it's easy to think of it as a table with a back bit and a leg, but we are going to see it in its most stripped down form. Let's go take a look. How's it going, mate? All right?
What about you?
Yeah, man.
Good.
I have sacrificed one whole table to show you guys this. So when I put the order into Ash, I said, this time, mate, I'm going to make a bit of a video showing everyone all of the broken down pieces. Can you leave one with all of the pieces that you've made, but don't weld anything together? So, starting at that back piece that goes over your wheel arch or in your wheel arch over your wheel, you have the arced piece. The ends of those are shaped so that when they weld onto there, you're not square peg, round hole, so that that is totally seamless there. So not only does that have to be bent, and that has to be cut, that has to be drilled in the exact center line so that when this is welded, and don't forget there's one each side, that hole there lines up with this little puppy here. So that is literally then welded in line with that hole, like that, keeping that lovely round kind of look about it. But take a look at this. So he's got to sort the radius out for that. It's got to be tapped, and then the end is beveled. This thing is gorgeous. That is tapped to an M12, yet the bolt I will put up through that is an M8 thumb nut. I will explain that back at assembly a bit later on in the video. So each table has 3 of these in total. So each batch needs 90 of these, except the one on the drop down leg, which consists of another pole, beveled at the end, a hole in it. That has a different radius. So in fact, those 2 that are on the pull-out bit at the back are not the same as the one on the drop-down leg. It's a totally different piece, even though it looks very similar. That drop-down leg, once again, consists of that pole, cut to size, beveled nicely, hole drilled in it, that will get welded on. Then the telescopic side, which is probably the simplest part of this build. This part here requires the least. That will get cut to length, beveled on the end, so it's absolutely lovely. And then a hole is put in it, and that is for the powder coaters, so that they can hang it while they powder coat it. So that is the leg. These posts, these tuck away in the back of the rear piece, the rear arc. They come out, go inside the table, cut to length, beveled on the end. But these ones are tapped because washer, that will get bolted down there to keep that in place. Nice and simple. That is how the bracket starts. So the bracket, that is done on the laser. Looks a bit weird in its flat form. I believe these washers that are laser cut, they come tabbed on like that, because otherwise these will fall through the laser bed. They come tabbed like that. He takes them off, cleans them up. That is bent so that this can go through the table, and then a bolt can go through there into the leg. That's simple. These cut to length, shaped up nicely. These end up in the platform of the table. I'm calling them all different names that I've never had to. Let me show you that, because that is the piece de resistance. This is the framework to the table. Now, when we first started on this journey, Ash, in a bid to make this cheaper, because that seems to be the biggest complaint of all, it's never its strength, it's never its quality once people see it, it's the price. No one that has got this table ever then goes on to complain about the price. They can see what they've bought. In a bid to make it cheaper, because Ash knew that this was going to come out quite labour intensive, we started with just a flat folded piece of aluminium with some rails that came out the back. I think I've even got the design. It was from April 2023. If it's still on my phone, I'll show that over the top. I hated it. I told him straight, hated it. That's no better than the one that previously existed. Picture roof rack. And that's what we've done. I said, picture a mini roof rack bolted to the side of your tyre as a table. And that's where we're at. Check that out. So that is bent. And if you asking the same question I am, don't know if you guys can see it, it's not quite truly 90 on 90. I've never seen it in this broken down form before. And he's telling me that's so when he puts this in a jig, it needs to fit inside all of these grooves. I mean, this thing, how you end up drawing something flat. welded into there, and then that area there gets obviously welded onto that frame. Once that's in position, that's way loose at the moment, that gets clamped in all at the same time and welded. Absolutely fantastic. And obviously aluminium, I don't know if you can see the scratch, these are laser cut. Some of them turn up scarred and things like that. He has to take care of that with like a DA or a sander or things like that. Make sure that primarily the face, because that's the bit that everyone sees, primarily that is as smooth as possible. But you're gonna get the odd pit every now and then. But I'm blown away. I'm blown away at how many parts there are. I mean, I know there is because I assemble them. But check this out. This is all of the parts that are handmade. Every single piece, obviously, apart from that, which is done on the laser, which then has got to be folded into this intricate kind of format. But I love seeing this. I love seeing all of these parts that make up such a wonderful design. I don't even know where that goes. Where does this go?
That's the leg holder. So that fits in that groove here. That fits in there.
Oh, of course!
And then that bit gets puddle welded there.
Yes, I've seen it 1,000 times. So that there, that's what picks up the telescopic leg. Honestly, crazy. And it's things like that that you don't see. I genuinely, my hand on my heart, struggle to realise where that went. Of course, that picks up the telescopic leg and makes it stow away. So yes, it can be done cheaper. Will I be looking at doing it, changing the design? No way. No way. And that's the fun thing, and that's where people fall into two different camps. You've got some people that see it and just say, take my money. Honestly, we were at the UAO table meet, someone walked past, they saw it, I tried it on their van, instant bank transfer, bang. Once you've seen the quality, I mean, I've never seen the broken down parts like this, but there it is. So this time round, I've got 29 tables, although 15 of those are gone, and I think Coombe Valley look to stock a couple in their showroom, and also Nomad Adventure vehicles, Nomad Adventure vans. They're going to have a couple in their showroom, so I'm pretty much going to have to ask him to do another batch immediately. If we push this to 60 tables, arguably the price point could come down a bit. Let me just shut this van door here.
I was just going to shut it for you.
You wouldn't know how. Look at that. She's electric, baby. But how do I travel with 60 tables? So the price may come down a tiny bit because you're doing it in batch. But what would it take for me to be able to ship those 60 tables back and forth? During this video, you will see how many times I have to move a single table before it ends up at the post office and is sent away. This video has long time been about the actual price. That was just a nice narrative to play with. It's about the pride. I can see the pride taken in building every single part. I wouldn't want to do that. I've got to now assemble 30 of those tables, and that does me up here quite badly. I can't imagine making 90 of those, 30 of those, 60 of those. But you get the picture. I wouldn't want to do it. And I bet you dread every time I text saying, we'll go again. Huh?
I love it.
Loves it, he's lying. He's lying. Right, gonna get these back now. It is Saturday. Usually, I would tie picking these up and dropping them off at the powder coaters in the same day. Unfortunately, that is not the case because it is Saturday, so I have to take these home and look to go again Monday morning. Monday morning, school run complete, and we are off to the powder coaters. I got back Saturday afternoon around 1:15. So that's a half day issued out to the tables. Right, I'll see you there. That is that then. They are dropped off at the powder coaters. Usually takes a couple of days depending on how busy they are. It is a fair proportion of the cost, but there's so much there. Every single little piece they've got to sandblast. It's not quite sandblasting, it's like a media blast. It's like a gentler version. They blast every piece so that it is clean, ready for powder coating. Then they've got to hang every single little piece on a wire, powder coat it, bake it, let it go hard or dry or whatever, and then they box them up. They're absolutely fantastic there. I wouldn't dream of going somewhere else. When I pick them up, I leave them in the boxes, for one, because you can't stack them all on top of each other. That's why the boxes end up doing the whole journey. But when I receive them, every tube has got like a cling film wrap so that when they're touching each other in the box, they're not rubbing and like scuffing each other. That batch there is probably, I believe, 220, number 220 to 249, because there's only 29 on this batch. So they've had and powder coated 220 tables, and I've not had a single problem. Not had a single problem apart from one that was damaged in transit by a local courier company owned by the post office. Customer received it. Aidan, it's damaged. Okay, send it back to me. I'll pay the postage and I'll send one back to you. So there's 35 quid down the drain. Took it to them. No problem, we'll take care of it. Didn't even charge me. They value their customers at Coyote Coatings. So Coyote Coatings in Stockport, if you've got any little job, they do gates and all of that kind of thing. You know, big jobs, little jobs. Like I say, a fair proportion of the cost, but worth every single penny. I wouldn't dream of going somewhere else. The finish is absolutely second to none. Back now to do the chopping boards. And I do, in fact, dread the moment that I have to do the chopping boards because it's so messy. It requires so many different tools. It's noisy. I can't really do it inside the workshop because it just covers everything with dust. We start with a sheet of bamboo. We run that down into rectangles, which will be the chopping boards themselves. I then set up a router table and chamfer all of the edges with a chamfered router bit on the router table. We then brand them. At that point is where we could sacrifice a couple of chopping boards altogether, because that branding is a bit of a particular process. You can go too much, you can go too little. I've lost many chopping boards because I've scorched the death out of the bamboo itself and it just looks a bit horrible, just looks like a square instead of an actual UAO. Then I've got a template. I lay that template on top of the bamboo chopping boards. That will allow me to mark with a drill bit every single chopping board exactly where the holes in the table will be, to add the feet, which will allow it to sit exactly where I want it and to stop that chopping board from sliding around and being annoying. We are off to the powder coaters to pick up the tables. All of the hardware is here. The chopping boards are made. The bags turned up yesterday. The bags are probably the easiest part of this whole table thing. And the reason being is, now that they're designed and now that they're proven to be amazing, I don't have to do anything. All I have to do is remember to order them, because there's a 6-week lead time. One batch of tables was actually held up because I didn't order the bags and I thought I had, because it kind of gets a little bit blurred lines. So back to the powder coaters to pick these up. The parts will all be powder coated obviously individually and packed individually, just the same way as I drop them off. I take care of all of the assembly, and that is what is next on the list. Get them back home in my little workshop cubby hole grotto, put these tables together. What I'll do is I'll probably smash the first 15 out, get them boxed up and ready to go and fulfill the orders that are already in. Those people come first. Those people that have patiently been waiting, they come first. get to unloading. That was made tougher, obviously, by you guys perching on top there. Not that I count every single trip, but I need to do that now 14 more times. I'm leaking.
Ooh, shiny.
It's a hot day, I'm not dressed for it. Black t-shirt, jeans on. Everything is here now. Tables are here, powder coated. All of the hardware's here. The bags are here. Thumb nuts are here. Chopping boards are done. Ironically, you wouldn't believe it, but now is where the hard work really starts. Done this a couple of times now, so I've got myself into what could be considered to be a bit of a routine. So I start by putting all of me hardwares where I can see them all in a separate pot, so I can just reach out and grab them. I order more than I need every single time, and I'm hoping that one day I'll get to a batch where I don't need to buy anything. Won't that be good? So the bags, for example, I order 60 at a time because that is the minimum order, which would be enough for 2 full batches, but not everybody buys a bundle. The bags come free with a bundle. Therefore, every time I finish a batch and they're gone and they're sold, I've got a couple of bags left over. I'm hoping that I can accumulate leftover bags, and for one single batch, I may not even have to order any bags whatsoever. That would be awesome. It'd almost be like free money. Man maths. What I opt to do is make all of the posts just all in a row and then line them up, and then I take care of all of the legs, because in that I need to insert one of these. This is like a thread cert, I believe they're called. I will explain that. I'm sure I mentioned previous in the video when I was at the fabricators that the threads on that and the underside of the table are M12, but it won't remain M12. That's going to end up being M8, and I'll explain that. So, bit of a conveyor belt kind of set up. I'll show you how I do one of these. Slot a washer over the top and hold it with my fingers like that. I mean, this is very detailed. And then I add just a tiny little kiss of Loctite to that. Get my post, wind that on like this. Make sure that the washer is nice and central, and then I just tighten that up like that, and that will go nowhere. And I know that that will go nowhere because I dropped mine on the concrete and chipped some of the powder coat, and because I had a few spare washers, I changed it, and man, did that take some brute force to remove. And then what I do is I line all of those up there on my shelf, up here, and then when the time comes down the line, once I've assembled the tables, I can just grab them and pop them in. So I'm doing one job lots of times, another job lots of times, and then it all kind of comes together rather than doing all of the jobs every time. Check these badges out. Thread reducing inserts, A4 stainless. So what we're going to do, every one of these, we're going to Loctite it, and then we're going to wind that in with a little tool. We're going to use a bolt and a spanner and a socket. It's a bit of a pain to kind of get used to, or to work it out for the first time. It's a bit like doing a riv nut with a nut and bolt. You can do it without an actual gun. And we're going to wind that in there. So that M12 becomes M8, so that when we insert this, it's a stainless thread. because that will probably no doubt be galvanized steel, and this is aluminium. If it gets wet, it could start to fur up, and that thread, multiple uses on that aluminium thread, could deteriorate it, could get a bit snotty, gritty, end up pulling through. I don't know. The fabricator tells me that this is the best way to do it, and I love it. It also, once it's finished, it also buttons off that thread and just looks just gorgeous. It's not about how it looks, but obviously there's a couple of winds left on that, but that's how that ends up looking, so that this thread lasts the test of time. And also, if that thread did ever strip, you could in fact remove that insert, because the thread on the actual piece has only been wound into once. That's the point. I'm going to show you now how I go about doing one of them, and then I'm going to go ahead and do the other 29. Here it is. Get our thread insert here. Wind that on a couple of times onto this. Like, it's not a pressing tool, I don't believe, but that nut on there is very specific. Loctite that bad boy. And what you do is you wind that in like that. Now, how did I, yeah. So what I would do, I don't know if you can see it there, but that's going to try to turn, so I use my hip there. So I wind that in, so that's tightened up the thread insert inside the piece of metal. And then what you have to do is you then, using your body, I go clockwise with this, anti-clockwise with the other to release it. Unwind that. Take a look at this beauty. Not an instructional video, obviously, because I doubt you guys at home have the need for that, but that's how that works. So that's not just a pre-done thread at the fabricators. I then have to do that to 30 legs, 29, and 60 in total when it comes to the tables, because there's one of these each side which clamps the table to the rear piece, and that's 60. This time is obviously 58. Each table gets laid out on my special rubber mat here, facing this way, and then I do myself 2 more of these thread inserts. Then I reach up and I grab 2 of my little posts, and I make sure that I put them in at this stage so that, well, I don't forget and they get sent out without them. It's never happened yet. Go to my little baggie of bits. Bracket, that goes on the underside. That gets tightened in with some countersink blackened stainless bolts, and then the nylock black nuts, the ones from previous, which weren't that easy to find, but I found them now, so that's all good. And then I'm trying to think about what I'm doing here. So from the underside, that bolt through there. Once again, I like to add a little bit of Loctite in there. Make sure that's lovely and free to move. Just seems to be like a second nature thing to do that now. Get myself a post, which I've already got. Drop that down in there. Tighten up the thumb nut, stow that away. I'm building bundles, so I insert 2 clips before I forget. They lock into the table just like that. When you receive your table, you will receive it with the arc piece upside down and the thumb nuts, the additional thumb nuts, in a little baggie. And there's good reason for that. If I was to put the table fully together, these would be poking down at the lowest point and the arc would be poking up at the highest point. I thought that that was going to be vulnerable to pierce through the cardboard and then end up shredding the cardboard, damaging your table, damage, postage costs, replacements and all that. So that's why they're separate in a bag, and the arc piece is upside down so that it just eliminates it being really high in a box that's got loads of void, like a cavernous box. When I put this in the box, and we stick our chopboard in there. Fits like an absolute glove. Now I'm still to put 4 little stoppers on here with a battery drill. I don't think you need to see me do that, but that sits in there. This box is so snug that I cannot even fit the chopping board in the bag pouch where it belongs because the box won't shut, and once again that would be vulnerable to damages. So this goes in there, and that's why I like selling the bundles, and this is why I'll always say please buy a bundle, because look at that, the fit then. You can't see that, but it is so snug. It's kind of not bursting at the seams, but it's so snug. The less that moves about, the better. And all of these things are things that I've had to learn along the way. Getting these boxes correct. Once again, I can probably find boxes cheaper, but these are custom made. I couldn't find any off the shelf. If you find something that's like mass produced, that's when it gets a little bit cheaper, and that's with everything in the world. But unfortunately, I couldn't. So these are specifically made for me. Once again, the tape, I didn't want branded boxes, so that when I sell a hat, for example, I can buy any box for a hat and I wrap it in the branded tape, and then it becomes a branded item as far as the packaging is concerned. It's just a little bit nicer when it turns up with a UAO on it. So any box that I use, even if it's a bag that I'm putting a t-shirt in, for example, it can still have that little touch of branding. So that's why I like the branded tape. But that there is a table bundle. Obviously I cannot show you an actual postage label because it is once again people's addresses, and I can only hope now that they do make it there safely and it actually makes it there, because if I lost one table in the post, I'd probably have to sell, what, 5 or 6 to make up for one. Hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you can see the pride and the effort that it takes to do this. I do enjoy it. It's not for the money. If I sold one table, I make something. If I sell 5 tables, I make a bit. And if I sell 10 tables, that's pretty cool. It's a numbers game. By the time I've sold all 30 tables, it's made some money. This isn't about the money. If it was, I would be farming this off to manufacturers in China. It isn't about that. I love the fact that it's UK made. I love the fact that it's powder coated here in the UK. The bags are made here in the UK. The only thing that probably isn't is the clips. Even the thumb nuts, like I've said to you, even they're here in the UK, which I could do so much cheaper in China. It's not about that. It's about the quality. I could make it cheaper 10, 15 times over, but it wouldn't be what it actually is, and I love what it is. Thank you once again. I do invite you to subscribe and check it out because we have plenty of new projects coming.